Hello, I'm your host Versatile Bark here with another riveting tale of little people and big giants and how they're intertwined by one man named Lemuel Gulliver. And yes, I am going to be narrating Johnathan Swift's classic tale, Gulliver's Travels. Hold on. Okay. Gulliver was a doctor, in the city of London. He grew tired of the crowded city, though he decided to take a trip on a ship. He wanted to journey to distant lands and see many different people and things. He had no idea his voyage would take him to the strange place in the world, places that still can't be found on any maps. This is the story of Little Land Lilliput, the first of many spots in Gulliver's amazing travels. At the dock, before his ship set sail, Gulliver said goodbye to his wife and children. He would miss them very much. He promised to return with wonderful gifts from the places he'd visit. And when I return, he told his young daughter, I will have many fascinating stories to share with you. The ship and its crew set sail across the sea. For many weeks the ship sailed on. Gulliver and the other sailors longed to reach land again. One night, while they were sailing through the East Indies, a terrible storm hit the ship. Gulliver and his shipmates had to leave the sinking ship behind. They climbed into a small boat and dropped into the stormy sea. At the mercy of the violent waves, the tiny boat twisted and turned, until suddenly it flipped over. The waves swallowed Gulliver and his shipmates. Gulliver awoke on a grassy shore. He could not move anything but his eyes. Gulliver thought he felt something move steadily up his leg. The pitter-patter he felt tickled him a little. He felt it moved up to his chest. Gulliver shifted his blurry eyes to look past his nose. There, standing on his chest, he could see what seemed to be a tiny human being who was no bigger than a spoon. Gulliver blinked his eyes twice. When he looked up again, the little man was still standing there, looking curiously back at him. Some ran away from him, from this massive human, while others shot arrows the size of needles at the hand he had broken free. The arrows did not hurt Gulliver at all. Gulliver did not mean to scare these strange little creatures. He decided to stay until they stopped. Soon the commotion died down. Gulliver heard one little man shouting to him from the platform nearby. The man's tiny voice was not angry, but he had to shout to be heard. The man spoke in a language that Gulliver could not understand. Gulliver stayed still and politely nodded at everything the little man said. This man must be their emperor, Gulliver thought. The emperor spoke kindly for the most part, and Gulliver did nothing to upset the small creatures. He did lift his hand again, however, only to point to his open mouth. The emperor understood that he was hungry. He ordered baskets upon baskets of breads and meats to be carried upon Gulliver's mouth. The little people dropped in enough food to feed 200 of their families. Then the emperor pointed off into the distance and called for a cart that 500 tiny carpenters had to build. The small people united him Gulliver corruptly climbed onto the cart. He allowed them to chain him to it. Then 900 of their strongest men pulled him to their capital city. Most of the buildings in the magnificent little city were no taller than Gulliver's knee. The tiny people pulled Gulliver to their large building, an ancient temple on the outskirts of their city. There they bound him in chains at the ankles. Gulliver understood their fear. They needed to protect themselves from being trampled. He did not mind the chains too much, and he felt honored to stay in their temple. Though their largest building was still small for him, Gulliver was thankful to have a roof over his head. He could crawl in and lay down, and only his feet were left sticking out. Sorry. Now Gulliver was eager to learn about this place and its people. He crouched down to the ground and made every effort to speak with them. The Emperor sent the finest scholars in the land to visit with Gulliver. He studied with them every day for several weeks. He learned the kingdom was called Lilliput, and the gentle, intelligent people who lived there were known as Lilliputians. The first words Gulliver learned to say in Lilliputians were, "Please remove my chains." They told him it would take time for the Lilliputians to get used to having a giant in their city, and Gulliver would have to be patient. Once again, Gulliver was very understanding. The Lilliputians fed him regularly. After all, and he had no complaints. Before too long, the Lilliputians were no longer afraid of Gulliver. They fondly called him the Man-Mountain. They came to visit him often. Some were brave enough to let Gulliver pick them up in his hand. That way he could talk to them without crouching. Since his voice shook the buildings and rattled their ears, Gulliver spoke softly around them. He showed them his coins and his pens, which they studied with great curiosity. The Lilliputians were especially amazed by Gulliver's pocket watch. Its ticking was very noisy to them, but they had many questions about it, about how it worked, and what it was meant to measure. Even the children of Lilliput came to love Gulliver. A trip to see the Man-Mountain was like a trip to an amusement park. Gulliver would lift them up in his hand, showing them the city, as he saw it from high above the tallest building. The children would dance, using Gulliver's hand as a dance floor. When Gulliver laid down for a nap, they would play hide-and-seek in his hair. Gulliver enjoyed amusing the children. He wondered what he could do to entertain the other Lilliputians. One day, the army of Lilliput marched out to field practice its drills. On their horses, in their fine uniforms, the soldiers reminded Gulliver of the toy soldiers he played with as a child. The Lilliputians were very proud of their navy, and Gulliver was fascinated with the soldiers' skills and movements. Gulliver built a stage for the army exercise, which he used his handkerchief to spread out a fine playing field for the Emperor's army. He picked up the horses and soldiers and put them on the stage. Then he lifted the Emperor and his court to his hand so they could see the army's maneuvers from above. Lilliputians liked this very much. So much, in fact, the Emperor ordered that this entertainment be performed daily. He wanted everyone to see their magnificent army He wanted everyone to see how skillfully they moved and how majestic they looked. Then the day came when Gulliver would be released from his chains, but first Gulliver had to plead an oath to the Emperor. He stood solemnly before the Emperor. Then he gladly made all the promises the Lilliputians asked him to make. The Man Mountain promised to be forever careful when he walked. He agreed to be the one who would deliver the Emperor's most important messages over the great distances in a very short time, and he offered to help the Lilliputian armies in time of war. In return, the Lilliputians gave Gulliver his freedom to move around their kingdom. They agreed to provide him with as much food each day as would feed almost 2,000 Lilliputians. A few weeks later, the Emperor visited Gulliver. He told Gulliver that the Lilliputians were getting ready for battle. For many hundreds of years, the Emperor explained, the Lilliputians had been at war with the only other kingdom they knew, an island nation called Belishivas. Long ago, Gulliver was told the Emperor of Lilliput and the Emperor of Bellucio had an argument over which end of the egg is best to crack first. The Emperor Bellucio chose the large end, while the Emperor of Lilliput liked to break his egg at the smaller end. Each one, though, his way was the best, and the argument between the two kingdoms grew. Sorry, I have a frog in my throat. The argument over an egg became a war, and that had never ended. The war was still going on to this day. The Emperor of Lilliput had just learned that the Emperor of Bellucio was now sending a large fleet of ships across the sea to attack Lilliput. The Lilliputians needed Gulliver's help. Gulliver did not like the idea of fighting in a war. He wondered why people would fight a never-ending battle over the correct way to crack an egg. Though he felt it was silly, Gulliver made a promise to his new friends. He told the Emperor he would help the Lilliputians in their battle. The Lilliputians had a fine army, but they did not have a navy or any battleships, since they had Gulliver on their side. However, they did not need either. Gulliver's job was to stop the ships of Bellucio before they reached the shores of Lilliput. He asked for several strong cables and a set of iron bars. Gulliver bent the bars into hooks and tied them to the cables. The sea between the two kingdoms was much too deep for the tiny people, but Gulliver could walk easily through the water in very little time. He set out on his own across the sea. Gulliver soon met the enemy ships as they left the shore of Bellucio, simply rising above the water. Gulliver frightened the Bellucians terribly, but most of them dove from the ships and swam back to shore. So brave Bellucians stayed on their ships to shoot arrows at the giant foe. The arrows did not harm the Man Mountain of Lilliput. As soon as Gulliver attached the hooks to their ships and started to pull them away, even the most fearless sailors leaped from their ships. Gulliver tugged the ships back across the sea to the land of Lilliput. Great cheers rose from the shore as he came closer, holding the entire fleet of Bellucio in one massive hand. Long live the Emperor of Lilliput, cried Gulliver. Without their fine fleet of battleships, the people of Bellucio could no longer wage war against the Lilliputians. The Bellucians sent a messenger across the sea in a rowboat to offer their surrender. From that day forward, the little people of Lilliput called Gulliver the great warrior of all time. He alone ended many sad years of battle, having reached peace with Lilliputians. The people of Blue Sumo invited Gulliver to visit their island. Gulliver, still wanting to learn more about the world and its people, was so happy to oblige them. He was sure many of their people were still afraid of him, but they would not be once they got to know him, and Gulliver hoped to learn about their customs, just as he learned about the people in the kingdom of Lilliput. Gulliver spent 2 fine days on the island of Blue Sumo. He was treated well there, and as he had been on Lilliput. The people of Blue Sumo were very much like the people of Lilliput. Gulliver could not understand why they had never gotten along with each other. On his 3rd day on the island, Gulliver spotted an empty boat bobbing across the sea nearby. It seemed large to him. It was a real boat for a man his size. Gulliver hurried to thank the Belusians for their kindness. Then he rowed the boat back to Lilliput to bid his dear friends a fond farewell. The Emperor presented him with several live cows and plenty of food for his journey home. Gulliver rowed away from the little island of Lilliput. Before long, Gulliver spotted a ship like the one he had once sailed on. He rowed swiftly to it and was welcomed aboard. He told the crew about his voyage to Lilliput. No one believed his story until he reached into his pocket and pulled out the tiny live cattle he had received from the Emperor of Lilliput. That was more than enough to convince them. Soon Gulliver was back in London, reunited with his family in London. People were willing to pay to see his tiny animals. Gulliver sold them to a circus. Then he embarked upon his next incredible voyage. After selling the little cattle, Gulliver was a very rich man. He set off on a ship to sail the southern sea. On this journey, Gulliver's luck was no better. His ship sailed into a monsoon and was tossed and turned for days. When the waters settled at last, the crew had no idea where they were. In the distance, they saw a rocky shore. Gulliver volunteered to swim ashore, hopefully that he would find help. He climbed upon a rocky hill to have a better look around, but there he saw nothing but a field of overgrown grass. Each blade of grass was as tall as 3 people. Gulliver turned back to look for his shipmates. They were sailing away without him. A giant was splashing through the water, chasing after the ship. Stranded in another strange land, Gulliver walked through the field of tall grass, looking for some sign of life. He came to a cornfield where the corn rose high over his head. Soon he felt the ground shake. The corn stalks began to fall around him. Gulliver was nearly squashed by a shoe that was as long as a sailing ship. The shoe belonged to a giant farmer, as tall as 12 people of Gulliver's size. Gulliver shouted so he would not get crushed. The farmer heard Gulliver's tiny shouts and stopped over to pick him up. With an amazing laugh and a big grin, the farmer dropped Gulliver into the darkness of his shirt pocket. The farmer carried Gulliver home to show his family what he had found. Their booming voices rattled Gulliver's ears. He could not understand their language, as these giants could hardly hear his voice. Even when he shouted, the farmer's wife was frightened of Gulliver, and the farmer's son played too rough. But the farmer's daughter was gentle and kind to Gulliver. She placed him on the kitchen table with a few crumbs of food to eat. She made a bed for him in her doll's cradle. She dressed him in clean clothes. The farmer's daughter spoke softly to Gulliver. She taught him many new words. Gulliver learned about the land of the giants and the kingdom called Brobdinga. After only a few days, Gulliver was able to speak the giants in their own language. Following a day of work in the field, the farmer liked to watch Gulliver eat. It amused him so much the farmer thought he might show the little man to his friends in town. His friends were amazed with what they saw. The little man was only the size of a doll, but he walked and talked like anyone else. Soon everyone in town wanted to see the living doll. The farmer set up a booth at the market. The townspeople gave the farmer money for the chance to see Gulliver. The farmer told Gulliver to sing and dance. Some giants paid to see him twice. When everyone in his town had paid to see Gulliver perform, the farmer decided to take him to the largest city in Brobdinga, where many rich people lived. In the city, the farmer made Gulliver perform for an audience 10 times a day. Gulliver was worn out, but he did as he was told. "You are starting to look thin and sickly," the farmer told him, "but there are more people with more money who still haven't seen you." The Queen of Brobdinga soon heard about the fascinating little man. She came to see the show. She was very amused with Gulliver. He was one of a kind, and the Queen liked to collect unique things. After the show, she asked the farmer if he would sell her that little man. She offered him a great sum of money. The farmer could not refuse. The Queen carried Gulliver back to the palace. There she ordered her servants to build a little room for him. It was inside a jewelry box, filled with tiny pieces of furniture, each fitted to Gulliver's size. The Queen ordered her tailor to make fine silk suits for Gulliver so he could get dressed up for dinner. Gulliver was quite comfortable in his little room at the palace, but the box had a lid on it. Gulliver was allowed to leave the box only when the Queen asked for him. She called for him at least once a day. At dinner, Gulliver ate at the Queen's table. She and her court enjoyed watching him while they dined. Gulliver became very sad with his life in the palace and spent most of the day in his room, with only small rays of light creeping in through the air holes in the jewelry box. The music that the Queen's band played was too loud. It made his little room rumble. Since all the books in the palace were as big as a house, Gulliver had nothing to read. The Queen noticed the frown on her little man's face. "If you are to dine with me," she scolded him, "you must show me you are enjoying yourself." "Beg your pardon, your Majesty," Gulliver spoke up. "At least I am very comfortable in this palace, but I would enjoy it here more if I had the freedom to move about." The Queen did not like the idea of her little treasure scurrying around the palace like a mouse. He could be trampled after all, and he was much too valuable to her. However, the Queen agreed to have a handle added to his box. She had ordered her servants carry him out on walks around the palace grounds each day. Whenever they went, people from every corner of the palace would crowd around to see the amazing little creature inside the Queen's jewelry box. The Queen also learned that Gulliver was once a sailor. She had a tiny sailboat built especially for him. After dinner, the queen and her subjects gathered around to watch Gulliver practice his sailing skills. One day, the king of Brobdinga called for Gulliver. Gulliver was carried to the throne room, where the king asked him many questions about the city of London and the little people who lived there. Gulliver told the king about the history of the people, about the wonderful books they had written, the pictures they had painted, and the beautiful music they had played. Gulliver played a tune for the king on a giant piano. To Gulliver, the song was beautiful, but the little notes did not please the king's giant ears. The king was amused with the way Gulliver spoke so proudly of the tiny kingdom where he was born. To a king of giants, Gulliver's homeland was nothing but a small and silly place. Still, boomed the king, you're quite the little people who are very fine and polite type of pet to have around the palace. You please the queen greatly, and I think more of my subjects would like to keep little creatures like you in their homes. The king ordered a crew of men to find more ships like the one that brought Gulliver to Dingnag. He told them to take Gulliver with them so that Gulliver could show them the rocky shore where he first landed. Gulliver was carried in his box to the coast. He helped the king's men search for ships on the sea. But there were none to be seen. Gulliver wished he could find a ship that would take him away from Brobdingnag forever. The king's men grew tired of looking for tiny ships on the vast ocean. They decided they would rather go for a swim. The giants left Gulliver on the shore, closed up tightly in his box. An eagle swooped down and scooped Gulliver's box off the shore. It carried Gulliver high above the ocean. When the eagle let go, Gulliver's box splashed into the ocean. The box floated for many days before Gulliver heard voices outside it. How do you get this thing open? A voice shouted into the box. Just flip the lid, Gulliver shouted back. He thought it was a giant who had found him, but it was a crew of sailors his own size. The sailors, with much effort, were able to saw a hole in the giant box, which was almost as large as their own ship. Gulliver told them about the giants in the royal court of Brobdingnag. The sailors thought that this was strange, shouting, "Man must be crazy," but Gulliver showed them a ring the queen had left inside her jewelry box. The gem on the ring was as large as a person's head. Gulliver gave the ring to the ship's captain, who was happy to take Gulliver back to London. Back in London, his home and his family seemed small to him. Gulliver felt as though he had stepped back into the little land of Lilliput. After only a few months, Gulliver was ready to take his next fantastic voyage. And that is Gulliver's Travel. Tune in when my next story is going to be Black Beauty. Anyways, that's my video. Please like, and subscribe to my channel. This is your host, Vesatwala Bog, signing off.